At 75, Eleanor Blackwood balances running her family's billion-dollar company while navigating complex relationships with her 4 grown children. When her youngest son brings home a charming fiancée, only Eleanor recognizes the predator hiding behind Victoria's perfect smile, a woman with a dark history of manipulating wealthy families. Now, with a wedding countdown ticking and corporate control at stake, Eleanor must wage a silent war against an enemy who's turning her own family against her, proving that the most dangerous force in business isn't youth or innovation, but a matriarch with nothing left to lose. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel, it's free, and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The moment James introduced his fiancée Victoria to our family dinner, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. At 75, I've learned to trust my instincts, and something in her perfectly practiced smile set off warning bells I couldn't ignore. As the founder of Blackwood Industries, I've spent decades recognizing predators in boardrooms, and now one was sitting at my table holding my youngest son's hand. What James saw as love, I recognized as calculation. What none of them knew was that Victoria and I had crossed paths before in ways that would shatter this facade she'd so carefully constructed. The question wasn't if I would expose her, but how much of my family I would lose in the process. Before we begin, I wonder, have you ever sensed danger in someone everyone else trusted completely? Mother, this is Victoria, James said, his eyes bright with an admiration that made my stomach twist. The woman I've been telling you about. I extended my hand, feeling the perfectly manicured fingers wrap around mine with practiced precision. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Blackwood, Victoria said, her voice melodic and controlled. James has told me so much about you and the incredible empire you've built. Empire, not family business, not legacy, empire. The word choice wasn't accidental. Please call me Eleanor, I replied, my smile not reaching my eyes. We're informal here, despite what the business papers might lead you to believe. The grand dining room, the one my grandmother had designed when she founded Blackwood Textiles, before it grew into the conglomerate it is today, felt suddenly small and airless. James pulled out Victoria's chair, oblivious to the tension crackling between us. Victoria's in finance, he announced proudly, as my other children, Alexandra, Richard, and Michael, exchanged pleasantries with our new guest. She's been helping me rethink some of our investment strategies. I raised an eyebrow. Has she now? How interesting that you haven't mentioned this in our weekly strategy meetings. James's face clouded. Because you always shut down new ideas, Mother. You're so resistant to change. Victoria placed her hand on his arm. James, darling, your mother has every right to be cautious. She's protected this business for decades. She turned to me, eyes glittering. But sometimes fresh perspectives can reveal new opportunities. Over the soup course, I watched Victoria work her charm on my family. Alexandra, always the peacemaker, was laughing at Victoria's anecdotes. Richard and Michael seemed equally captivated. Only I saw how calculated each gesture was. How she'd researched each of my children's weaknesses and exploited them with surgical precision. Richard's struggle in restaurant? Victoria had connections in the culinary world. Michael's passion for environmental causes? Victoria had just finished consulting for a green energy firm. Alexandra's art gallery? Victoria knew collectors who would be absolutely fascinated by her newest exhibition. By dessert, Victoria had them eating from her palm. I hadn't seen my family this united in years, all rallied around a woman they'd just met. To James and Victoria, Alexandra raised her glass. Welcome to the family. I lifted my glass mechanically, remembering another dinner, years ago, with another charming guest who had nearly destroyed everything. As coffee was served, Victoria excused herself to take a call. I followed her into the hallway, deliberately taking the long route to appear casual. Impressive performance, I said quietly, startling her as she ended her call. You've done your homework on my family. Victoria's smile didn't waver. It's not homework when you genuinely care, Eleanor. I love James. Do you, or do you love what he represents? I moved closer, lowering my voice. The Blackwood name opens many doors. A flash of something, recognition perhaps, crossed her face before her mask slipped back into place. I understand your concerns. Any mother would be protective. Not protective, Victoria, observant, There's a difference. She tilted her head, assessing me. James warned me you might be difficult. He said you've never approved of anyone he's brought home. Perhaps he should ask himself why. Victoria stepped closer. Eleanor, I hope we can move past this initial awkwardness for James's sake. For James's sake, I echoed. Interesting that you position yourself as his advocate after knowing him for, 6 months? I've been his advocate for 35 years. People change, Eleanor. Children grow up. They need different advocates at different stages of life. The implication was clear. I was obsolete, a relic. I had been neatly categorized as the overbearing mother, the obstacle to her plans. They do indeed change, I agreed, but predators rarely do. Their hunting grounds merely shift. For a fraction of a second, her composure slipped, barely perceptible, but to me, it was like watching a crack form in a dam. I'd struck a nerve. Before she could respond, James appeared. Everything okay out here? Wonderful. Victoria recovered instantly, her voice warm honey. Your mother was just sharing some wisdom about the business world. James looked between us, suspicion clouding his features. Mother, don't worry, dear. I was being perfectly civil. I patted his arm. Victoria and I were finding common ground. Later that night, after they'd gone, I sat alone in my study. The heart of the house, where deals had been made and crises averted for 3 generations. The family portrait on my desk showed happier times. Before my husband's death, before the children scattered to pursue their own interests, before James became the last one standing to inherit control of Blackwood Industries. James, my youngest, had always been the most vulnerable to manipulation, eager to please, desperate for approval, and now, poised to control a fortune. I opened my laptop and began to search. Victoria Chambers, age 34, though I suspected she was older. Penn graduate, financial consultant for multiple investment firms. Nothing suspicious on the surface, but I hadn't built a multi-billion-dollar company by accepting things at face value. I picked up my phone and called Peter, my head of security for the past 20 years. I need a deep dive on someone, I said when he answered. Completely confidential, no one in the family can know. Name? He asked simply. Victoria Chambers, currently engaged to James. Peter didn't ask why. He'd witnessed enough family drama over the decades to know when I sensed trouble. How deep, he asked. All the way down, I replied. There's something familiar about her. I want to know if she's operated under different names, different identities. Check London, Paris, Singapore, any place where wealth accumulates. After hanging up, I stared at the wedding invitation sample James had excitedly shown me earlier. The cream paper seemed to mock me with its embossed elegance. James Blackwood and Victoria Chambers request the honor of your presence. 3 months. That was all the time I had to uncover the truth before Victoria legally became part of my family and gained access to everything I'd spent my life building. The game had begun. Victoria thought she was dealing with an elderly woman being pushed aside by the next generation. She had no idea what she was up against. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had faced worse threats than her and emerged victorious. My grandmother hadn't built this company by being weak, and neither had I. Victoria had made a fatal mistake. She had underestimated me because of my age. She saw my gray hair and wrinkles and assumed my mind had dulled, my instincts had faded. She was wrong, and I would make sure she regretted it. As I closed the wedding invitation, my phone pinged with a message from Peter. Initial search raising flags, meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. I smiled grimly. The first piece of the puzzle was falling into place. What would Victoria do when she discovered that the frail old woman she was trying to manipulate had teeth? Chapter 2. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of my office at Blackwood Tower. I'd arrived before dawn, as had been my habit for 40 years. Victoria thought I was a relic, but she'd never understand the discipline that built empires. 7 folders, Peter said, placing them on my desk. No pleasantries, no coffee chat. This was why I valued him. Different cities, different names, same pattern. I opened the first one, London, 2018. Victoria went by Victoria Wells there, engaged to the son of a shipping magnate. Relationship mysteriously ended after she attempted to restructure company assets. Paris, 2019. Victoria Laurent. Brief engagement to a banker whose family business subsequently faced a hostile takeover attempt. Singapore 2020, New York 2021, Chicago 2022. She's methodical, I murmured, scanning the documents. Never stays long enough to face consequences. Always has an exit strategy. And always targets family businesses with aging leadership, Peter added, preferably with a vulnerable heir apparent. I looked up sharply. James, Peter nodded grimly. Her most ambitious target yet. Blackwood Industries is exponentially larger than anything she's attempted before. I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. Somewhere out there, Victoria was planning her next move, unaware that I was already 3 steps ahead. Has she made any financial moves yet? Not directly, but James has been making inquiries about accessing his trust fund early. He's scheduled meetings with the board next week to discuss modernization initiatives. The pieces were falling into place. She's using him to lay groundwork, classic corporate restructuring language designed to consolidate control before a major shift. Peter hesitated. Eleanor, there's more. She's been meeting with Westridge Capital. My blood ran cold. Westridge was our most aggressive competitor, waiting decades for any opportunity to acquire Blackwood's market share. That's not in her usual pattern, I said. She typically avoids outside entities. This is bigger than her previous operations. She may need backing. I closed the folders, my mind racing. Thank you, Peter. Not a word of this to anyone. After he left, I considered my options. Direct confrontation would only push James further away. Victoria had undoubtedly prepared him for that, painting me as controlling and paranoid. The more I opposed her, the more she'd use it to isolate him. My phone rang. Alexandra. Mother, are you free for lunch today? I'd love your input on something. Alexandra, my eldest, had always been the diplomatic one. Running an art gallery had further refined her ability to navigate difficult personalities. If anyone in the family could be an ally, it would be her. Of course, dear. The usual place at noon. The usual place was a small French bistro we'd been frequenting since Alexandra was in college. As I entered, I saw her already seated, looking remarkably like my younger self. Same determined jawline, same analytical eyes. You look troubled, she said as I sat down. Do I? I thought I'd perfected my poker face decades ago. Alexandra smiled. To everyone else, perhaps. I've had more practice reading you. The waiter brought our usual orders. No need to even look at menus after 20 years. So, I began, what did you want my input on? Alexandra hesitated. Actually, I wanted to talk about James and Victoria. My guard instantly rose. What about them? She came to see me yesterday at the gallery. Alexandra stirred her soup. She had some concerns about you. I imagine she did. Mother, she said you've been having memory lapses, that you've been confused about business details. She suggested we might need to consider scaling back your involvement. Despite expecting something like this, the brazenness took me aback. Victoria was moving faster than anticipated. And you believed her? A woman you've met exactly once? Alexandra looked pained. Of course not, that's why I'm here. But James is worried too. He said you've been hostile toward Victoria from the start, for no reason. I have my reasons. Then share them with me, help me understand what's happening. I assessed my daughter, weighing how much to reveal. Alexandra was shrewd, but she also had a soft heart. If I showed her all the evidence too soon, her distress might alert Victoria. Victoria isn't who she claims to be, I said carefully. I'm looking into her background. That's all I can say for now. Alexandra frowned. Mother, if you have concerns, we should discuss them as a family. Secretive investigations will only make things worse. Would you believe me without evidence? Would any of you? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Give me 2 weeks, I said. Then I'll bring everything to the family. Alexandra studied me, then nodded slowly. 2 weeks. But Mother, tread carefully. James is truly in love. If you're wrong about this, I'm not wrong. After lunch, I headed to the one place I knew I could think clearly. My grandmother's original factory, now preserved as a museum of sorts. The vast sunlit space where the first Blackwood textiles were woven had always centered me. As I walked through the silent machines, my phone rang again. James. Mother, we need to talk. Are you at the office? No, I'm at the mill. What's wrong? I'll be there in 20 minutes. When James arrived, his face was thunderous, a look I hadn't seen since his rebellious teenage years. Victoria told me about your conversation, he said, without preamble. How could you threaten her? I didn't threaten anyone. She said you implied she was after the company's money, that you called her a predator. I chose my words carefully. I expressed concern about the speed of your relationship. That's my right as your mother and as the head of this company. The head of this company, he repeated bitterly. That's all that matters to you, isn't it? Control. You can't stand the thought of someone else making decisions. James, no, Mother, I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, trying to prove I'm worthy of Blackwood. And the one time I find happiness, real happiness, you try to destroy it. His words stung more than I wanted to admit. Had I been so focused on protecting him that I'd failed to see him? I only want what's best for you, I said softly. Victoria is what's best for me. She believes in me. She sees my potential. And what has she suggested about that potential? Taking a larger role in the company? Accessing your trust fund early? Meeting with the board without me? His face registered surprise before anger took over. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting what 3 generations have built, including your inheritance. James laughed humorlessly. There it is. You think I'm too weak to protect myself, too naive. That's not... It is. It always has been. He turned to leave. The wedding is in 3 months. I want you there as my mother, not as the CEO of Blackwood evaluating a business threat. But if you can't do that, then don't come at all. After he left, I sank onto an old wooden bench, feeling every one of my 75 years. Victoria had played this perfectly, turning my caution into paranoia, my protection into control. My phone buzzed with a text from Peter. Victoria meeting with Westridge again tomorrow, 9 a.m. I straightened my spine. I hadn't survived 4 decades in business by giving up when things got difficult. If Victoria wanted war, she'd get one. I hadn't built an empire by backing down. I dialed Richard's number. My second oldest had the financial acumen I needed right now. Richard, I need you to clear your calendar tomorrow morning. There's something important we need to discuss. Is this about the company or about James? Both, and I need absolute discretion. There was a pause. Does this have anything to do with why Alexandra called me asking about power of attorney protocols? My blood ran cold. What? She said it was hypothetical, something about protecting family assets if a principal became incapacitated. Victoria was moving faster than I thought, laying groundwork to have me declared incompetent, the classic move against aging corporate leaders. Meet me at my house tonight, 8 o'clock. And Richard, tell no one. After hanging up, I stared at the massive looms that had started the Blackwood fortune. My grandmother had operated them herself, working 18-hour days while raising my father alone. I won't let her take what you built, I whispered to the empty room. I won't let her destroy our legacy. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, a fitting backdrop for the battle ahead. 3 months until the wedding, 3 months to expose Victoria for what she was. But first, I had to ensure my own children didn't unknowingly become weapons against me. Time was running out. Chapter 3. Richard arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, punctual as always. The kitchen light cast long shadows across the garden as he approached my house. You look terrible, he said bluntly as he entered. A charming greeting from my favorite chef. I'm your only chef. He kissed my cheek. And you didn't call me here at 8 p.m. to exchange pleasantries. I led him to my study and closed the door behind us. What's this about Alexandra asking about power of attorney? I asked. Richard sat heavily in the leather chair. She called yesterday, said she was exploring options to protect the family's interests if certain eventualities arose. Eventualities? Her word, not mine. She mentioned cognitive decline scenarios. He studied me. Mother, what's happening? I poured 2 fingers of scotch for each of us. Victoria is happening. For the next hour, I showed Richard everything Peter had uncovered. The multiple identities, the pattern of infiltrating wealthy families, the connections to Westridge Capital. Jesus, Richard whispered. Does James know any of this? He wouldn't believe me if I told him. Victoria's already convinced him I'm a controlling mother trying to sabotage his happiness. Classic isolation technique, Richard analyzed. Cut the target off from their support system. Precisely, and now she's planted seeds with Alexandra about my mental competence. I leaned forward. Richard, I need to know where you stand. He looked offended. With you, obviously. Even if it means temporarily opposing your brother, even if he accuses you of betrayal. Richard's jaw tightened. James is being manipulated. Standing with you is standing with him. He just doesn't see it yet. Relief washed over me. One ally secured. The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting. James was furious. "You went behind my back," he hissed as board members filed into the conference room. "Did we? I seem to recall you making unilateral decisions lately." Victoria placed a calming hand on his arm. "James, darling, let's hear what your mother has to say." Once everyone was seated, I stood at the head of the table. For 40 years, I've guided this company through economic downturns, market shifts, and technological revolutions. We've thrived, because we've balanced innovation with stability. I clicked to show our consistent growth. Recently, there have been suggestions that we need radical change, that our approach is outdated. I looked directly at Victoria. That new blood should lead us in new directions. James shifted uncomfortably. After careful consideration, I've decided these voices are right. The room fell silent. Even Victoria couldn't hide her surprise. Effective immediately, I'm announcing a restructuring. James will assume the role of Executive Vice President of Innovation and Strategy, with full autonomy over new initiatives. James's eyes widened. "Mother, what are you—" Additionally, I'll be stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on long-term planning and mentorship. Board members exchanged glances. This was unprecedented. However, all major financial decisions over $50 million will still require my signature for the next 6 months. I saw Victoria's smile falter slightly. This wasn't part of her plan. Later, back in my office, Richard was waiting. "How did it go?" "Exactly as expected. Victoria thinks she's won." I sat down, suddenly exhausted. She doesn't realize it's a trap. And if she doesn't take the bait, she will. She's too ambitious not to. Richard paced the office. "Mother, are you sure about this? Once we start down this path—" "I'm saving my son from a predator," I cut him off. "And I'm saving this company from corporate raiders. There's no price too high." "Even if James never forgives you?" The question hung in the air. "He'll understand," I said, more confidently than I felt. Eventually. By 6:30 that evening, the dining table was set, and I had reviewed the evidence one last time. Everything had to be perfect. Alexandra arrived first, tension evident in her shoulders. "I don't like this," she said bluntly. "Ambushing James and Victoria feels wrong. Would you prefer we wait until she's legally part of the family? Until she has access to everything?" Before she could respond, Richard arrived with Michael in tow. My third child hadn't been home in months, yet he embraced me without hesitation. "You look tired, Mom," he said with concern. "She's not fine," Richard contradicted. "She's taking on Victoria single-handedly while the rest of us were oblivious." The doorbell rang. "Places everyone," I murmured. "And remember, let me lead." James and Victoria entered, looking like a power couple from a glossy magazine. "Mother," James nodded stiffly. "This family dinner was unexpected." Dinner began with tense small talk. Throughout it all, Victoria maintained her charming facade, asking thoughtful questions, laughing at the right moments. As dessert was served, I finally broached the real topic. "James, the board was quite impressed with your promotion today." James nodded cautiously. "I appreciate their confidence." "Victoria," I turned to her, "you must be very proud of James's accomplishments." "Immensely," she smiled. "I've always believed in his vision for the company." "Curious, since you've only known him for 6 months," I said mildly, "yet you seem to have such insight into his business acumen." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "Speaking of the company, James, I've been meaning to ask, how did your meeting with Westridge Capital go last week?" James froze. "How did you know about that?" I finished for him. "The same way I know Victoria met with their CEO twice in the past month." Victoria's composure slipped momentarily. "I don't know what you're implying, Eleanor, but—" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I turned to my other children. Victoria has been systematically targeting wealthy heirs for years: London, Paris, Singapore. Each time she insinuates herself into their lives, isolates them from family, then strips their assets before moving on. I produced a folder and slid it across the table to James. Everything is in there: her previous identities, the pattern of behavior, the offshore accounts where she's been funneling money. James stared at the folder, but didn't open it. "This is outrageous." Victoria stood up, her calm facade finally cracking. "Open the folder, James," Michael said quietly. If Mother's wrong, what's the harm in looking? Slowly, James reached for the folder. Victoria's demeanor shifted instantly. This is ridiculous. I don't have to stand here and be interrogated. If you trust me at all, you'll leave with me now. James, I said softly, if I'm wrong, I'll apologize to Victoria publicly. But if I'm right, don't you want to know before you tie your life to hers? For a long moment, no one moved. Then James opened the folder. Victoria's face hardened as she watched him scan the documents, his expression shifting from disbelief to confusion to dawning horror. Victoria Wells, he read aloud. Victoria Laurent, Victoria Reeves. He looked up at her. Who are you really? James, those are lies, fabrications to turn you against me. The Westridge meetings, were those fabrications too? Victoria's strategy visibly shifted. The vulnerable act was replaced by something colder, more calculated. Fine, she said, suddenly businesslike. Westridge offered a partnership. I thought it would benefit us. Behind my back, behind the board's back? I was protecting your interests, she snapped. Your mother is smothering you, controlling every aspect of the business. James held up one of the documents. And this offshore account in the Caymans? The one with $5 million transferred from my trust 2 weeks ago? Victoria's eyes darted toward the door, calculating her escape. That was a temporary measure, a smart investment opportunity. Without my knowledge? Victoria turned to James, making one last attempt. James, everything I did was for us, for our future. Your mother never saw your potential. She was grooming you to be her puppet, not her successor. James looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. How much of it was real? Any of it? Something flashed in Victoria's eyes. Calculation, not pain. The sex was real, she said coldly. The rest was business. The cruelty of her words seemed to physically strike James. He recoiled. Get out, he whispered. James, get out, he roared, slamming his hand on the table. Victoria gathered her composure one final time. You'll regret this, she said, looking at me. All of you will, especially you, Eleanor. I was offering him a way forward. Now you'll all go down with this sinking ship. After she left, James sat motionless, staring at the documents. James, I began softly, reaching for his hand. He pulled away. Don't. Son, not now, Mother. You were right. Is that what you want to hear? You were right, and I was a fool. We were all fooled, Alexandra said. She was convincing. But I brought her into our lives, into the company. He looked up at me, his eyes haunted. I almost handed her everything you built. But you didn't, Richard interjected. We stopped her in time. Through the windows, I could see James later standing alone in the garden, his silhouette stark against the night sky. The boy who had sought my approval his entire life, now facing the consequences of rejecting it. Outside in the garden, I watched Alexandra embrace James, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. My son, my baby, my heir. I had protected him, yes, but at what cost to his pride, to his independence? Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Westridge, the board, damage control. But tonight, in the ruins of what should have been a family dinner, we began the long process of healing the wounds Victoria had inflicted on all of us. The Blackwood legacy would continue, of that I was certain, but the path forward would be harder than any of us imagined. Chapter 4, The Aftermath. The morning after Victoria's explosive departure, I arrived at Blackwood Tower before dawn. Peter was waiting in my office, dark circles under his eyes. Morning, he said, handing me a coffee. Westridge issued a statement. I took the tablet he offered, scanning the carefully worded press release denying any improper discussions with Blackwood Industries. Damage control, I murmured. They're running scared. With good reason. I've compiled a dossier on their CEO's more questionable ventures. Keep that in reserve. For now, let's focus on Victoria. She's gone to ground, checked out of her hotel at 5 a.m. The offshore account is frozen as you ordered. The $5 million is secure. And James? Peter hesitated. He came in around midnight, went straight to his office. Security says he's been there all night. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Alexandra stood in the doorway. You're here early, I observed. So are you. She closed the door. Richard told me Westridge backed down. For now. She studied me. You don't seem particularly victorious. Victory isn't always satisfying. You're worried about James. Aren't you? Of course, but he's stronger than you think. I raised an eyebrow. Strong enough to face the board this morning? to explain how he nearly handed control of Blackwood to a woman working with our competitors. He made a mistake, Mother. We all do. Not mistakes that endanger a multi-billion-dollar company. Alexandra's expression hardened. There it is, the company first, always. That's unfair. Is it? Last night wasn't just about protecting James from Victoria, it was about protecting Blackwood Industries. Her words stung because they contained truth. I had always seen James as both my son and the heir to the Blackwood legacy. The company is our legacy, I said finally. It supports hundreds of families. And that's why James struggles with your approval. You've always seen him through the lens of the company first, son second. I've always wanted what's best for him, I said softly. But sometimes what's best isn't what makes someone strongest. The board meeting is in an hour. James needs to lead it. He's in no condition. Yes, he is. If you step in to save him, you'll only reinforce what Victoria told him, that you don't believe in his capabilities. After she left, I sat in silence, turning her words over in my mind. The boardroom was tense. Board members spoke in hushed tones, glancing nervously at the empty chair at the head of the table, James's new seat. Minutes ticked by. Whispers grew louder. I saw doubt creeping into the director's expressions. Just as I was about to step in, the doors opened and James walked in. He looked transformed, immaculately dressed, shoulders squared, jaw set with determination. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady as he took his place. "Before we begin, I need to address the elephant in the room. Last night, we discovered that Victoria Chambers had been engaged in deceptive practices that posed a significant risk to Blackwood Industries." Murmurs rippled around the table. James raised a hand, silencing them. Specifically, she had unauthorized meetings with Westridge Capital and attempted to divert funds from my personal accounts. He paused, meeting each board member's eyes before continuing. "I take full responsibility for bringing Miss Chambers into our company environment. My lack of due diligence created a vulnerability that could have had serious consequences." I felt a surge of pride. James wasn't hiding behind excuses. However, thanks to the vigilance of our security team and my mother's instincts, the threat was identified and neutralized before any lasting damage could be done. For the next 2 hours, I watched my son lead the board, meeting with confidence and clarity. When it concluded, board members clustered around James, expressing confidence in his leadership. "You raised him well," Richard murmured, appearing at my side. "He did this himself," I replied. "I just gave him the space to try." As the room cleared, James finally approached me. "How did I do?" he asked quietly, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to bring me his drawings for approval. "You were magnificent," I said honestly. "I couldn't have handled it better myself." Relief washed over his face. I was terrified, but I kept thinking, what would Mother do? "You did better. You did it as James, not as Eleanor Toumeau." He smiled slightly, then grew serious. "I owe you an apology. The things I said about you being controlling, toxic." I held up a hand. "Victoria manipulated both of us. Still, I should have trusted you. And I should have trusted you with the truth earlier." "Buy you lunch?" he finally offered. "I'd like that." Over lunch, James picked at his food. "Do you think she ever cared at all?" he asked suddenly. "Or was it all an act?" "I think Victoria is someone who learned early that emotions are currency to be spent where they yield the highest return. I keep replaying every moment, looking for signs I missed." "Don't torture yourself. She was exceptionally good at this." "Before me, you mean? Before the idiot who fell for it?" The self-loathing in his voice alarmed me. "You weren't an easy mark," I said firmly. "You're a man who believes in people's potential. Those are strengths, not weaknesses. They're liabilities in our world. Only if they're not balanced with discernment, something you've now learned the hard way." He looked up. "Did I disappoint you?" The question caught me off guard. "Disappoint me?" "James, no, you made a mistake. Then you stood up in front of the board and took responsibility like a leader. I'm proud of you." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a release of tension he'd carried for years. As we finished lunch, James's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. "It's Michael." When he hung up, his face was grim. "Victoria just gave an interview to the Financial Times. She's claiming she was pushed out of Blackwood because she uncovered financial irregularities. Says she has evidence of tax evasion and securities fraud." My blood ran cold. "That's absurd. Our books are immaculate." She claims to have documents proven otherwise. The reporter has given us until 5 p.m. to comment before they run the story. Call Peter, tell him to trace every document Victoria ever accessed, and get the PR team in the conference room in 30 minutes. By 3 o'clock, we had assembled a crisis team: James, Richard, Alexandra, lawyers, PR specialists, and Peter's security team. According to Michael's source, she has emails allegedly showing discussions about hiding losses from overseas operations. Plus documentation of a shadow accounting system, James explained. That's ridiculous. We don't have a shadow anything, the CFO scoffed. Victoria doesn't need facts. She just needs enough plausible fabrication to cause doubt, I said. The timing is deliberate, Peter added. Markets close in 2 hours. If this story breaks at 5, our stock will go into free fall overnight. We need to get ahead of this, the PR director urged. We can't deny specifics we haven't seen, Richard challenged. James had been quiet, his brow furrowed in concentration. What if we didn't fight it? He said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. What if, instead of denying her claims, we invite scrutiny? Announce that, in light of these concerning allegations, we're opening our books to an independent audit. Complete transparency. Our CFO blanched. That would be unprecedented. Exactly, James nodded. No company with something to hide would do that. I considered his suggestion. It was bold, risky, and potentially brilliant. The audit would take weeks, I pointed out. The stock would still take a hit. Yes, James acknowledged, but a smaller one, and it would recover once the audit cleared us. Plus, it would completely discredit Victoria. There's something else, Alexandra interjected. Victoria's credibility. Who is she? A scorned ex-fiancée with a history of financial manipulation. We need to expose her past as part of our response. James winced slightly. Making Victoria's deception public meant exposing his own poor judgment. James, I looked to him. This is your call. He took a deep breath. Do it. All of it. The audit. Victoria's background. Everything. I'd rather face temporary embarrassment than let her damage what this family has built. Pride swelled in my chest. This was leadership, putting the greater good above personal comfort. One more thing, I said as James headed out. You should be the one to deliver this statement. His eyes widened. Me? Not you? You're the executive vice president now, and you have the most credibility to address this, having been closest to Victoria. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. All right, I'll do it. As he left, Richard approached me. That was well played. Given him ownership of this. It wasn't a play, he's earned it. Richard studied me. You're really letting go, aren't you? After all these years of controlling everything. Not letting go, I corrected. Evolving. There's a difference. Somewhere out there, Victoria was watching, waiting to see if her revenge would succeed where her manipulation had failed. She had underestimated me once. Now she was underestimating my son. Her final mistake. Chapter 5. James stood behind the podium in Blackwood Tower's press room, the glare of camera lights cast in his face in sharp relief. I watched from the back, deliberately removed from the spotlight. Good afternoon, he began, his voice steady. I've called this press conference to address rumors that will soon be circulating about Blackwood Industries. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. This was unexpected. A preemptive press conference about rumors not yet public. I've recently learned that my former fiancée, Victoria Chambers, has made serious allegations about Blackwood's financial practices. These allegations are categorically false. James paused, letting the statement land. However, rather than simply denying these claims, Blackwood Industries has decided to take unprecedented action to demonstrate our commitment to transparency. He gestured to the CFO, who stepped forward with a document. Effective immediately, we are commissioning an independent audit of all Blackwood financial records for the past 5 years. We have engaged Morris & Klein to conduct this review with complete access to all records. A ripple of surprise moved through the press corps. Additionally, I feel it's important to provide context for these allegations. Ms. Chambers and I recently ended our engagement after discovering she had attempted to misappropriate company funds and engage in unauthorized meetings with competitors. The room erupted in questions. James raised a hand, silencing them with newfound confidence. I take full personal responsibility for the lapse in judgment that allowed Ms. Chambers access to sensitive company information. When asked directly about me, where is Eleanor Blackwood during this crisis? James smiled slightly. My mother is exactly where she needs to be, guiding the company she built while allowing the next generation to step up. As the press conference concluded, Richard appeared beside me. "He's a natural," he murmured. "Better than anyone expected," I agreed, "especially himself." My phone buzzed with a text from our head of investor relations, markets responding positively, stock holding steady despite rumors now public. The first battle had been won, but I knew better than to think Victoria was finished. "Where is she?" I asked Richard. "According to Peter's sources, she's staying at the Parkview under a different name." Have Peter increase security on all family members. Victoria's shown she's willing to go to extremes. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of auditors, press inquiries, and shareholder reassurances. By the third day, the auditor's preliminary assessment was clear. No evidence of financial irregularities. Victoria's proof consisted of manipulated documents. The company's stock began to recover. Industry analysts praised James's handling of the crisis. Through it all, Victoria remained ominously silent. It made me deeply uneasy. "She's planning something else," I told Peter during our morning security briefing. "My sources say she's been making calls to several board members, long conversations." "Which ones?" "Harrison, Dawson, and Garcia." My heart sank. The three newest directors, all with limited personal loyalty to me. She's building a coalition, I realized, trying to undermine our leadership from within. Particularly with the annual shareholder meeting only 2 weeks away. "What's her angle with the board members?" Peter hesitated. "It's personal, Mrs. Blackwood. She's suggesting that your age is affecting your judgment, that the recent turmoil is evidence the company needs fresh leadership untainted by family drama. The familiar accusation stung. Too old, too set in my ways, a relic of the past. She's pushing for an emergency board meeting," Peter continued. 3 directors can call one under the bylaws." I stood, anger burning through my veins. She's not just attacking the company anymore. She's coming directly for me. "What should we do?" "Nothing," I decided. "Let them call their meeting. In fact, I'll save them the trouble and call it myself." Peter looked surprised. "You're giving them the platform they want?" "I'm controlling the narrative. Victoria wants to whisper from the shadows. I'm bringing everything into the light." On Friday morning, I met with my children to share my plan. "You want to do what?" Alexandra looked stunned. "I could accelerate the succession timeline," I repeated calmly. "Make James CEO immediately, with me stepping into an advisory role as chairwoman." Richard frowned. "Mother, this feels like giving in to Victoria's pressure." "No," I corrected. "It's recognizing an opportunity disguised as an attack. Victoria thought she could use my age against me, create division between James and me. Instead, we use it to complete the leadership transition we already started." James looked at me with shock and uncertainty. "Mother, are you sure? This isn't how we planned it." "Plans change, James. You've proven yourself in ways I never anticipated." "But Victoria will think she won," Alexandra objected. "Let her think that," I smiled coldly. "The difference between thinking you've won and actually winning is the difference between Victoria and me." "I think Mother's right," Michael said. "This turns Victoria's attack into an opportunity." James was quiet for a long moment, staring at the family portrait in my office. "I'm ready," he said finally. "Not because I think I know everything you know, but because I finally understand what you've been trying to teach me all these years." "Which is?" "That leading Blackwood isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about building the right team, listening to the right voices, and having the courage to make difficult decisions." Pride swelled in my chest. "Exactly." As my children left, James lingered behind. "There's something you're not telling them," he said quietly. I smiled slightly. "Victoria isn't working alone. Westridge is still behind this, despite their public denials. A hostile takeover attempt? Possibly, or a move to split the company. Either way, we need a unified leadership front." "What happens after the board meeting? What's our next move against Victoria and Westridge?" "But first we secure your position. Then we spring the trap we've been setting since the day Victoria walked out of our family dinner." The boardroom was tense when we arrived. Harrison spoke first. "Thank you for calling this meeting, Eleanor. Several of us have concerns about the recent turmoil surrounding Blackwood Industries." "Perfectly understandable," I replied smoothly. "Is that what you call the public scandal involving your son and his fiancée?" Garcia asked sharply. "The allegations of financial impropriety?" I call it what it is, I said evenly, a targeted attack on our company that has failed, as the ongoing audit is confirming. Nevertheless, Dawson interjected, the situation raises questions about leadership stability, about whether family dynamics are interfering with sound business judgment. An excellent point, I conceded, surprising them, which is why James and I have come today with a proposal that addresses precisely those concerns. James distributed folders to each board member. Effective immediately, I continued, I am recommending that the board appoint James Blackwood as Chief Executive Officer. I would step into the role of Executive Chairwoman. Harrison looked stunned. This is unexpected. Is it? The succession plan has been in development for 3 years. We're simply accelerating the timeline based on James's demonstrated readiness. Demonstrated readiness, Garcia repeated skeptically. During a week of crisis management, there is no better test of leadership than crisis, James replied confidently. The vote was 10-2 in favor. James Blackwood would become CEO of Blackwood Industries, effective immediately. As we left the boardroom, Peter was waiting in the hallway, his expression urgent. She's here, he said quietly. Victoria in the lobby. Should we have security remove her? Peter asked. No, James decided. I think the new CEO and chairwoman should personally deliver the news of today's vote. Together, I agreed. Victoria saw us immediately, her confident expression faltering as she registered our unified approach. Eleanor, James. She nodded stiffly. I was just meeting someone for coffee. In our lobby? How convenient, I replied. You're just in time to congratulate the new CEO of Blackwood Industries. Her eyes widened. New CEO? The board just approved my appointment, James confirmed. Mother will be continuing as executive chairwoman. Victoria struggled to mask her shock. Well, congratulations. A rather sudden decision, isn't it? Almost as if it were reactive to recent events. Not at all, I smiled coldly. Simply the right move at the right time. Speaking of timing, I believe you have an appointment in about 30 minutes that you won't want to miss. Confusion flickered across her face. I don't know what you're talking about. No? That's odd because Agent Donovan from the Financial Crimes Division was quite specific about the meeting time, 2 o'clock at the federal building. The blood drained from Victoria's face. What have you done? James stepped forward. Nothing you didn't do to yourself, Victoria. Wire fraud across state lines, identity theft, attempted misappropriation of funds. You can't prove anything, she hissed. Actually, we can, I corrected. Peter has been quite thorough in documenting your activities. Victoria's eyes darted around, calculating escape routes, but security personnel were positioned at every exit. This is absurd, she tried again. You're just retaliating because I exposed the truth about Blackwood's finances. A truth that the independent auditors have already disproven, James cut her off. You won't get away with this, she spat. Westridge won't let you. She stopped abruptly, realizing her mistake. Westridge? I raised an eyebrow. How interesting that you'd mention them. Victoria's face hardened. This isn't over, Eleanor. For you it is, I replied. Agent Donovan is very eager to speak with you. As security escorted her to the waiting federal agents, I turned to James. Congratulations, CEO Blackwood. Your first executive decision was perfectly executed. He looked at me with newfound respect. You've been planning this since the night she left our house, haven't you? No longer, I admitted. I had Peter start building the case the day after I first met her. Around us, employees had gathered, whispering. James noticed and straightened his shoulders. Back to work, everyone, he announced with confident authority. We have a company to run. As the crowd dispersed, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Victoria had underestimated the Blackwood matriarch once too often. Her final mistake. Chapter 6. 3 months after Victoria's arrest, I sat on the terrace of my home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. At 75, I had seen thousands of sunsets, but lately I found myself appreciating them with renewed wonder. Perhaps because, for the first time in decades, I was watching them without the weight of an empire on my shoulders. The transition had been smoother than anyone expected. James had stepped into the CEO role with a natural confidence that surprised even those who had known him his entire life. The press had initially buzzed with speculation about whether he could fill my shoes, But those questions had quickly faded as he put his own stamp on the company, respecting tradition while pushing boundaries I had been reluctant to explore. "Tea, Mother?" Alexandra appeared at my side, carrying a tray with a steaming pot and 2 cups. "Thank you, dear." I accepted the cup gratefully. "Are the others here yet?" "Richard just arrived. Michael texted that he's running 10 minutes late. James is coming directly from the office." I nodded, settling back in my chair. Family dinner had become a weekly tradition since the Victoria incident, a time to reconnect, to strengthen the bonds that had been tested. "You seem peaceful," Alexandra observed, sitting beside me, "more than I've seen you in years." "Do I?" I smiled. "Perhaps I am. There's something liberating about passing the torch. Even to someone who does things differently than you would?" I laughed softly. "Especially to someone who does things differently. That's how companies evolve, Alexandra. Each generation brings its own vision." She studied me thoughtfully. "I never thought I'd hear you say that. You've always been so controlling." "Protective," I corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I considered her question seriously. "Yes, though the line is admittedly thin. Protection comes from love, from wanting to shield those you care about from harm. Control comes from fear of losing power, losing relevance. And which was it with Victoria?" "Both, perhaps." I sipped my tea, the familiar warmth, a comfort against the cooling evening air. I was protecting James and the company, but I was also afraid that she represented everything I couldn't control about the future. Alexandra nodded slowly. "You never told us how you knew about Victoria. From the very beginning, before any evidence, what was it that set off your alarms?" I closed my eyes, remembering that first dinner, the moment Victoria had walked into our home. "Recognition," I said finally, "not of her specifically, but of what she represented. I've spent my life in boardrooms full of people who want something from me. You develop an instinct for identifying predators." "But it was more than that, wasn't it?" I smiled at my perceptive daughter. Yes, it was her eyes. They never matched her smile, a perfect mask, but the eyes always betray the truth. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted our conversation. Moments later, James appeared on the terrace, still in his business suit, looking tired but satisfied. "Sorry I'm late," he apologized, kissing my cheek before sitting down. "Board presentation ran long." "The international expansion?" I asked. "Yes, they approved it unanimously." He grinned, the boyish excitement I remembered from his childhood breaking through his professional demeanor. "We break ground on the Singapore facility next month." "Congratulations." I resisted the urge to offer advice or ask probing questions. This was his vision, his achievement. Richard joined us, bringing glasses of wine for everyone except me. I still preferred tea in the evenings. "To the new Blackwood era," he toasted, raising his glass. "And to the woman who made it all possible." "I'll drink to the first part," I demurred, "but the company's success now belongs to all of you." "False modesty doesn't suit you, Mother," Richard teased. "Without your foundation, without your foresight in grooming James, even when he resisted, none of this would exist." James nodded in agreement. "He's right, even the Singapore expansion builds on relationships you cultivated decades ago." "Then I'll amend my toast," Richard declared, "to legacies that evolve, and to matriarchs wise enough to let them." We clinked glasses as Michael arrived, completing our circle. As dinner was served, the conversation flowed easily from business to personal matters, laughter punctuating the serious discussions. I watched my children, now fully adults, with lives and achievements of their own, and felt a contentment I hadn't known was possible. "Any word on Victoria's case?" Michael asked during dessert. James nodded. "Sentencing is next week. The prosecutor expects 5 to 7 years, given the pattern of fraud across multiple states." "And Westridge?" I inquired. "Keeping their distance. Their stock took a 15% hit when their connection to Victoria became public. The chairman resigned last month." I nodded, satisfied. Justice had been served, though not through vengeance or public humiliation, as Victoria might have orchestrated. Instead, it had come through proper channels, through the patient building of an irrefutable case. "What still puzzles me," Alexandra mused, "is why she took such risks. She was clearly intelligent, capable. She could have built something legitimate with those skills." "Some people aren't interested in building," I replied. "They prefer to take what others have built. It's easier, faster." but ultimately hollow, James added quietly. I see that now, looking back. Everything with her was about acquisition, possessing things, controlling outcomes. There was no joy in the process, only in the conquest. His insight surprised me. The James of 6 months ago wouldn't have recognized this distinction. You've changed, I observed. He met my gaze steadily. We all have. Victoria may have been a predator, but the experience taught us something valuable. Which is? That this family, this legacy, is stronger than any external threat. Not because of wealth or power, but because of the foundation you built, the values you instilled in all of us. Emotion tightened my throat unexpectedly. My children had always respected me, sometimes feared me, occasionally resented me. But this genuine appreciation of the principles I had lived by, was something new. I made many mistakes, I admitted. I was too controlling at times, too focused on the company at the expense of your individual needs. You did your best, Michael said simply. After Dad died, you were carrying an impossible burden. And despite those mistakes, Alexandra added, you raised 4 children who are still speaking to each other in their 40s. That's no small achievement. Richard raised his glass again. To Mother, who taught us that family and legacy are worth fighting for, even when the threat comes from within. As my children toasted, I felt a sense of completion, of a circle, closing. Victoria, in her misguided attempt to destroy what we had built, had inadvertently strengthened it. Her betrayal had forced us to examine what truly mattered, to articulate the values that had silently guided us for generations. Later, as the evening wound down, James lingered after the others had left. Walk with me, he suggested, gesturing toward the garden path that wound through the property. We strolled in comfortable silence for a while, the path illuminated by the soft glow of landscape lighting, another of my careful designs, created years ago when this house was new. I owe you an apology, James said finally, for doubting you, for accusing you of interfering when you were trying to protect me. No apology needed. Victoria was manipulating both of us. Still, I said things, cruel things about you being controlling, toxic. I let her turn me against you. I touched his arm gently. James, I was controlling, perhaps not toxic, but certainly dominant in ways that sometimes stifled your growth. Victoria exploited a real dynamic between us. She didn't invent it. He considered this. Maybe, but you were right about her from the beginning. I should have trusted your instincts. And I should have trusted your resilience, I countered. Instead of investigating behind your back, I should have come to you directly with my concerns. We had reached the old oak tree at the edge of the property, the one my grandmother had planted when she bought the land with her first textile profits. 3 generations of Blackwoods had climbed its branches, including James as a boy. I'm a better CEO because of this experience, he said, looking up at the massive canopy above us. I understand now what you were trying to teach me all those years. Which is, that leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about knowing which questions to ask, which voices to listen to. He smiled ruefully. And sometimes it's about recognizing a predator before they strike. I laughed softly. A valuable skill in business and in life. I won't make that mistake again. Perhaps not that specific mistake, I acknowledged, but you'll make others. We all do. The key is learning from them, not avoiding them altogether. We turned back toward the house, walking side by side in the gathering darkness. The Blackwood matriarch and her successor, not in conflict, but in harmony. Will you come to the Singapore groundbreaking? He asked. It would mean a lot to have you there. As your mother or as the former CEO? Both, he replied simply. Always both. I smiled, feeling a contentment that had eluded me for decades. I wouldn't miss it. Back at the house, as James prepared to leave, he paused in the doorway. You know, Victoria asked me once why I was so desperate for your approval, why your opinion mattered more than anyone else's. And what did you tell her? I said it was because you built an empire from a family business, that your success was intimidating. He shook his head. But I was wrong. Oh? It wasn't your success that I was reaching for. It was your certainty, your absolute conviction in doing what you believed was right, regardless of opposition. That's the real Blackwood legacy. After he left, I returned to the terrace, watching the last glimmers of twilight fade from the sky. My grandmother had started with a single loom and an unshakable belief in her vision. My father had expanded that vision across the country. I had taken it global, and now James would take it further still, in directions I had never imagined. Victoria had seen our family business as a prize to be captured, an asset to be stripped. What she never understood was that Blackwood Industries wasn't just a company, it was the physical manifestation of something far more powerful, a legacy of vision, determination, and adaptation passed from generation to generation. She had tried to exploit what she perceived as weakness, the complicated dynamics of family business, the vulnerability of aging leadership, the insecurities of the heir apparent. Instead, she had inadvertently strengthened every aspect of what she sought to destroy. As the stars emerged in the darkening sky, I thought about my grandmother, who had faced her own predators in her time, who had stood firm against those who thought a woman couldn't build something lasting, who had taught my father, who taught me, that the most important asset in business wasn't money or power, but conviction. Victoria had never stood a chance against that legacy, against that bloodline, against this matriarch who had recognized a predator the moment she walked through the door. The Blackwood legacy would continue, stronger than ever before, and somewhere out there, behind prison walls, Victoria would have years to contemplate her gravest error, underestimating an old woman who had spent her life protecting what she loved. Some called it controlling, others called it toxic. I called it legacy, and it would outlive us all. Wow, what a story! And there is more coming. Don't forget to subscribe to not miss a new stories.